The evening descends gently over the New Jersey countryside in the late autumn of 1879. The fields around Menlo Park are still, the tall grass bending under a soft breeze that carries the scent of dry leaves and distant wood smoke. A two-story wooden building, painted a weathered white, stands alone at the edge of a dirt road. Its windows catch the dying light, turning from pale gray to deep amber as the sun slips below the horizon. Inside, oil lamps are being lit one by one, their flames steady and golden, casting long shadows across the cluttered rooms. This is the laboratory of Thomas Alva Edison, a place where the ordinary world meets the quiet pursuit of wonder. Inside the main workshop, the air is warm and still, smelling of machine oil, hot metal, and beeswax. Thomas Edison, a man of 32 with a slight stoop, sits at a long workbench cluttered with wires, glass tubes, and coils of copper. He wears a simple dark suit, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, and a pair of wire-framed spectacles perched on his nose. His fingers move slowly, deliberately, adjusting a delicate filament inside a glass bulb. The only sounds are the soft hum of an induction coil, the distant rhythm of a vacuum pump, and the occasional scratch of a pen as a notebook is filled with observations. It is a place of patient, unhurried work, a quiet sanctuary of invention. Shelves line the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with hundreds of jars and bottles. Each one contains a substance that might one day become a part of a new invention: fine carbon powder, filaments of bamboo and cotton thread, copper sulfate crystals, beeswax, and shellac. Glass jars of liquid mercury catch the lamplight and glimmer like captured silver moons. Rolled engineering drawings, tied with twine, lean against wooden cabinets. The room has the feel of an alchemist's den, but grounded in the practical, methodical spirit of the 19th century. There is no rush here. Every element is catalogued and considered, every experiment a quiet conversation with the laws of nature. Charles Batchelor, Edison's trusted assistant, moves through the laboratory with the soft, measured steps of someone who has learned to respect the silence. He is a young Englishman with a calm demeanor, his waistcoat dusted with chalk and carbon. He carries a tray of freshly blown glass bulbs, each one a fragile universe waiting to be tested. He sets them down gently on the workbench, the glass clinking softly like wind chimes. The two men exchange few words, a nod, a slight smile, an understanding born from countless hours of shared labor. Their collaboration is a quiet duet, a dance of hands and minds that needs no grand gestures. The scent of paraffin wax and hot glue drifts from a corner where a small pot bubbles over a spirit lamp. A young machinist named John Cruacy is there, carefully sealing a vacuum chamber with a brush, his movements as precise as a watchmaker's. The faint, rhythmic hiss of the vacuum pump continues in the background, a gentle heartbeat for the entire building. Through the half-open window, the sound of crickets begins to rise, replacing the daytime songs of birds. A solitary cow lows in a distant pasture. Night has fully arrived, wrapping the laboratory in a dark velvet cloak, but inside the lamplight burns steadily, a citadel against the dark. What is most remarkable about this scene is the sense of patience that pervades it. There is no frantic race to finish, no dramatic cry of discovery. For Edison, invention is not a lightning strike, but a slow cultivation, like watching a garden grow. He has learned that failure is simply a note in the margin, a signpost pointing toward another path. Each burnt-out filament, each sputtering battery, is received with a quiet note in his journal and a new idea for tomorrow. The laboratory at Menlo Park is a monument to the beauty of trial and reflection, a place where time is measured not in hours, but in the gradual unfolding of possibility. Sometime after midnight, Edison walks to a small window at the far end of the lab and lifts the sash a few inches. The cool night air enters, carrying the scent of dry leaves and the distant murmur of the Raritan River. He stands there for a long moment, his tired eyes tracing the outline of the moon, a pale lantern in the sky. His thoughts are not of grand achievement, but of small adjustments, a filament a little thinner, a carbon grain a little purer. The quiet of the countryside at night is a comfort, a soft blanket under which ideas can germinate. A train whistle wails faintly in the distance, a lonely sound that soon fades into the rustle of the wind. Then, turning back to his bench, he picks up a wooden pencil and begins to sketch a new vacuum pump design, the graphite leaving gentle marks like the tracks of a snail on the page. The lamp beside him flickers for just a second, then steadies. The hours pass unnoticed. When the first gray light of dawn begins to filter through the eastern windows, the laboratory is hushed, the experiment sleeping. Edison himself has dozed off, his head resting on his folded arms, the lamp still burning. The workshop is a portrait of devotion, framed in amber light, suspended in the peaceful space between night and morning. Long before the lamplit evenings of Menlo Park, there was a quiet canal town in Ohio called Milan. In the warm summers of the 1850s, the Milan Canal was a gentle waterway lined with weeping willows that dipped their branches into the still green water. Young Thomas Alva Edison, a boy of 7 or 8, would often sit on the grassy bank, watching the slow passage of flatboats laden with grain. The sunlight filtered through the willow leaves, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow on the water. Dragonflies skimmed the surface, and the air smelled of sweet hay and river mud. It was a world of calm observation, where a child's mind could drift and wonder without hurry. The Edison family lived in a modest brick house not far from the canal. Inside, the rooms were filled with the scent of baking bread and the soft ticking of a clock on the mantel. Thomas's mother, Nancy, a former schoolteacher, sat with him by the window in the afternoons, a primer open on her lap. She read aloud in a low, melodic voice, her finger tracing the words. The light from the window fell on the pages, illuminating the shapes of letters that soon became gateways to a larger world. Her patience was infinite, her belief in her son's intelligence unshakable. In that sunlit room, the foundation of an inventor was laid, not through strict lessons, but through the gentle nurturing of curiosity. Beneath the house, in the cool, earthen-floored cellar, young Thomas set up his first chemistry laboratory. Shelves made of old planks held a collection of jars and bottles, each filled with powders and liquids of strange colors. The only light came from a candle stuck in a brass holder, its flame dancing to the drafts that slipped through cracks in the foundation. Here, in this subterranean sanctuary, he mixed concoctions and watched reactions bubble and fizz. The cellar smelled of damp stone and sharp chemicals, a secret den where a boy could pretend to be a great alchemist. His experiments often failed or produced foul odors, but each one taught him a small truth about the behavior of matter, a quiet lesson he would carry into adulthood. When he was a little older, Thomas took a job as a newsboy on the Grand Trunk Railway between Port Huron and Detroit. The train chugged peacefully through the Michigan countryside, past fields of wheat and quiet farmhouses. In the baggage car, he set up a tiny laboratory with the conductor's permission, using old shelves and a small stock of chemicals. As the train swayed gently on the tracks, he would read scientific books or conduct miniature experiments, the rhythmic clack of the wheels a soothing accompaniment. Passengers sometimes watched the earnest boy through the doorway, their faces reflecting a mixture of curiosity and quiet respect for his dedication. It was during these years that an incident caused him to lose much of his hearing, an event he later described not as a tragedy, but as a kind of blessing. The world grew quieter, and in that quiet, he found an immense capacity for concentration. The constant noise of life, the chatter, the cries, the clatter, faded into a soft, distant hum. He could sit for hours in a noisy train car or a bustling workshop and remain entirely absorbed in his own thoughts. This inner silence became one of his greatest tools, allowing him to hold long, uninterrupted conversations with his own ideas, far from distraction. In the evenings at home, mother and son continued their tradition of reading by lamplight. The kerosene lamp on the table cast a warm, amber circle across the pages of Shakespeare or Gibbon's History of Rome. Nancy listened as Thomas read aloud, her knitting needles clicking softly like a metronome. The world outside the window was dark and still, the canal a silver thread under the stars. These hours were a sacred time, a quiet communion that nourished the boy's mind and heart. It was in that gentle, lamplit room that he learned the power of stories and the beauty of language, a gift that would later help him explain his inventions to the world. As night deepened, young Thomas would sometimes steal back to the canal bank alone. The water lay mirror-smooth, reflecting the stars and the dark outlines of the willows. Fireflies blinked along the shore, tiny living sparks that fascinated him. He would lie back on the grass and gaze up at the constellations, feeling the earth's slow turning. In those moments of perfect stillness, he was not a newsboy or a cellar alchemist, but a dreamer on the edge of an infinite mystery. The canal flowed on, patient and eternal, carrying a boy's silent wonder toward a future that no one could yet see. And so the years turned, and the canal town of Milan remained a quiet anchor in his memory. Long after he became the world's most famous inventor, Edison would recall the soft splash of a flatboat pole, the rustle of willow leaves, and the steady glow of his mother's reading lamp. Those simple, sunlit images were the bedrock of a life devoted to bringing light and sound to the world. The boy by the canal had learned to see the extraordinary in the ordinary, and that gift would never leave him. In the end, all his great inventions were just an extension of that child's vision, a way of bottling a little piece of that quiet wonder and sharing it with the world. The year is 1877, and the Menlo Park laboratory is hushed in the glow of late afternoon. On a sturdy wooden table near the window, a curious contraption sits half-assembled. It consists of a brass cylinder wrapped in a thin sheet of tin foil, a hand crank, and a stylus attached to a vibrating diaphragm. The machine looks like a mechanical flower waiting to bloom. Edison has been working on it for weeks, drawing sketches late into the night. His colleagues watch with quiet interest, but no one yet understands what this strange device might do. The air is thick with the scent of beeswax and the faint ozone tang of the induction coil. Edison approaches the table, his movements slow and deliberate, as if he is about to perform a delicate ritual. He takes hold of the crank and begins to turn it evenly, the gears engaging with a soft whirring sound. Leaning close to the mouthpiece, he recites a nursery rhyme in a clear, steady voice. Mary had a little lamb, its fleece was white as snow. His voice is neither loud nor dramatic, it is the calm tone of a man speaking to a child. The stylus etches a wavy groove into the tin foil, translating sound into a fragile, physical memory. No one speaks. The only sound is the gentle rasp of metal on metal, a whisper of creation. When the rhyme is finished, Edison carefully repositions the stylus at the beginning of the groove and begins to turn the crank once more. What emerges from the horn is not a human voice in its full richness, but a thin, tinny echo, a ghost of a sound that crackles with static. Yet the words are unmistakable. Mary had a little lamb. It is the first time in history that a machine has spoken with a human voice. In the laboratory, there is no applause, no shouting, only a slow, spreading smile on Edison's face and a quiet, shared astonishment among his assistants. They have witnessed something magical, but they receive it with the reverence of a prayer answered in a whisper. The room settles into a contemplative stillness. Bachelor steps forward to listen again, his ear close to the horn, his expression that of a man hearing a secret. The recording is brief and fragile, likely to be worn away after a few more playbacks, but it is enough. It proves that sound can be caught and released, that a moment of speech can be preserved like a pressed flower in a book. The little machine on the table is a time capsule made of brass and tinfoil. Outside the window, the sky has turned the color of lavender, and the first star of evening glimmers faintly. It is as if the universe itself is pausing to acknowledge this small, quiet triumph. In the months that follow, news of the phonograph spreads slowly, like ripples on a pond. People travel to Menlo Park to hear the talking machine, their faces alight with a mixture of disbelief and delight. A parlor demonstration is arranged, where families gather in a sitting room lit by gaslight. They take turns speaking into the horn, then listen with ear tubes, their mouths forming silent O's of wonder. The phonograph does not shout. It murmurs, it lulls, it recites poetry and songs in a voice that seems to come from a whisper-thin realm between waking and dreaming. It invites listeners to lean in, to quiet themselves, to attend to the delicate miracle of captured sound. Late at night, after the visitors have gone, Edison often sits alone with the phonograph. He winds the crank and lets it play the same scratchy recording over and over, not as an engineer testing a device, but as a man listening to his own heartbeat. The cylinder turns, the stylus traces its path of uneven grooves, and the voice repeats its nursery rhyme, growing fainter each time like a fading memory. The only other sound is the ticking of the clock on the wall, measuring out the seconds of a world that has been forever changed. In the amber glow of the oil lamp, the machine sits like a patient confidant, keeper of a secret that will transform the way humanity remembers itself. When at last exhaustion overtakes him, Edison extinguishes the lamp and sits for a moment in the darkness, the silence now a presence rather than an absence. The phonograph rests on its table, waiting for morning, its cylinder holding the ghost of a lullaby. The laboratory is peaceful, the only light coming from the pale moon through the window, painting silver stripes on the floor. The great invention sleeps, a quiet sentinel in a world newly able to hold on to its own voice. And in that darkness, the seeds of 1,000 future recordings of music, of loved ones, of history lie dormant, dreaming of the day they will speak again. Edison dreams that night of a vast library of wax cylinders, rows upon rows of recorded voices from every corner of the earth, whispering together in perfect harmony. The dream is not one of noise or chaos, but of a gentle chorus, a murmuring tapestry of human experience. He wakes the next morning with the image still vivid, the taste of possibility on his tongue. The phonograph is not merely a machine, it is an ark of echoes, a vessel that will carry the fragile music of everyday life across the ocean of time. And in the soft morning light that fills the laboratory, he knows that the work has only just begun. The quest for a practical electric light was not a single flash of genius, but a long, patient journey through a forest of filaments. In the Menlo Park workshop, the glassblower's torch hissed softly as he shaped delicate bulbs, blowing through a tube with the careful breath of a musician. The bulbs were clear and fragile, like soap bubbles caught in time. Edison and his team tested material after material for the filament: platinum wire, carbonized paper, cotton thread, even human hair. Each one glowed briefly in the vacuum, a tiny sun that soon blackened or burned out. Yet every failure was a lesson, a piece of a larger puzzle being assembled with infinite care. The search led Edison scouts to distant lands in search of the perfect plant fiber. One envoy traveled to the bamboo forests of Japan, where thick groves of tall green stalks swayed gently in the humid air. The explorer walked among the silent, towering bamboo, selecting specimens with the reverence of a botanist collecting sacred herbs. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, dappling the forest floor with shifting patterns of gold. The bamboo was packed in long boxes and shipped across the ocean, a quiet traveler destined for a new purpose. In the laboratory, the stalks were shaved into thin strips and carbonized in a kiln, emerging black and brittle, ready to carry light. The process of testing was slow and methodical, a ritual repeated hundreds of times. A filament was clamped into the glass bulb, the air was pumped out to create a near-perfect vacuum, and then the current was gradually applied. The glowing filament would first appear as a faint orange thread, then brighten to a steady white gold incandescence. The men watched in silence, stopwatches ticking as the bulb burned for minutes, then hours. Each successful lifespan was recorded in a leather-bound journal, the numbers growing slowly, like a garden tallying its blossoms. There was no hurry. The electric light would come when the filament was ready, not a moment before. The vacuum pump, a massive iron contraption with a rhythmic chug, was the steady heartbeat of the operation. It wheezed and sighed, a mechanical lung that sucked the air from each bulb, leaving a pristine emptiness where the filament could glow without burning up. The pump required constant attention, its leather gaskets greased, its valves adjusted. The machinist who tended it, a quiet German named Ludwig Bohm, worked with the patience of a sexton winding a clock. The pump's rhythm became a familiar background music, a lullaby that accompanied the long watches of the night. On New Year's Eve of 1879, Edison invited the public to Menlo Park to witness the new electric lamps. He had strung dozens of bulbs along the road and through the buildings, and as dusk fell, the lights were switched on one by one. The crowd that gathered did not cheer or shout. They simply stared in hushed amazement, as if witnessing a star fall to earth and remain. The bulbs glowed with a soft, steady light, unlike the flickering yellow of gas or the harsh glare of arc lamps. It was a light that felt gentle, almost domestic, like a captured moonbeam. People walked slowly along the illuminated path, their shadows stretching long behind them, their faces lifted in quiet wonder. Inside the laboratory, a single bulb was left burning for hours as a test of endurance. Its filament, carefully carbonized bamboo, glowed without faltering, a tiny hearth shared by everyone present. The assistants took turns watching it, refilling the vacuum pump's oil, noting the time. There was a communal sense of reverence, as though they were tending a newborn flame entrusted to their care. The bulb's light fell on the tired faces of the team, smoothing the lines of exhaustion into a gentle, collective peace. They spoke in low murmurs, careful not to disturb the fragile miracle. Outside, the night was deep and cold, but inside there was only warmth and the steady pulse of incandescent hope. In the weeks that followed, electric lights began to appear in homes and businesses along the streets of New York. The transition was quiet, almost unnoticed at first, a maid turning a gas valve for the last time, a family gathering under a new pendant lamp that cast no shadow, a shop window glowing softly long after the sun had set. The era of flickering flame and sooty glass was drawing to a close. People slept more peacefully now, their rooms illuminated by a steady light that never guttered or smoked. The world was learning to trust the gentle hum of electricity, a sound as soothing as a distant waterfall. Edison himself, in the quiet hours after the celebration, returned to his bench and sat in the pool of light from his own creation. He gazed at the glowing filament, a delicate thread that seemed to hold within it the patience of 1,000 trials. The lamp made no noise, gave off no smoke. It was simply present, a silent companion. He thought of the bamboo groves in Japan, the patient hands of his glassblowers, the countless nights of vacuum pumps and carbon dust. All of it had led to this quiet moment, a solitary man in a wooden workshop, bathed in a light that would never be extinguished. It was, perhaps, the most peaceful triumph the world had ever known. By the late 1880s, the humble laboratory at Menlo Park had given way to a sprawling industrial complex in West Orange, New Jersey. In the early morning light, the red brick buildings rise like a quiet village of industry, their tall chimneys breathing lazy plumes of steam into the cool air. The main building is a long, 4-story structure with rows of arched windows that catch the sunrise, turning the glass into sheets of gold. Workers arrive on foot or by streetcar, their lunch pails swinging, their faces calm with the anticipation of a day's labor. There is no jarring whistle or clanging bell. The start of the shift is marked by the slow turning of clock hands and the soft hum of dynamos awakening. Inside the main hall, the ceiling soars high above rows of sturdy oak workbenches. The space is flooded with natural light from the tall windows, supplemented by his own incandescent bulbs suspended on cords. Skilled machinists, many of them immigrants from Europe, bend over lathes and milling machines, their movements economical and precise. The air smells of cutting oil, varnished wood, and the faint sweetness of shellac. A phonograph in the corner plays a gentle waltz, its music a delicate thread weaving through the clatter of industry. Here, invention is no longer the work of a solitary figure. It is a symphony of many hands, a collective craft dedicated to turning ideas into objects of beauty and usefulness. The complex includes a library of over 10,000 volumes, a sanctuary of knowledge lined with dark wood shelves and illuminated by soft green-shaded lamps. Edison spends many hours here, poring over scientific journals and chemical treatises, a pencil tucked behind his ear. The room is quiet, the only sounds the rustle of turning pages and the scratch of a note being taken. A large globe stands in one corner, inviting contemplation of distant markets and raw materials. In this peaceful, book-scented space, the raw material of invention is gathered, not just facts and formulas, but the slow synthesis of ideas that can only happen in silence. Adjacent to the library is the pattern shop, a woodworker's haven where the models of new inventions are carved from mahogany and pine. The floor is strewn with fragrant wood shavings that curl like ribbon. Craftsmen work with chisels and planes, shaping prototypes of improved phonographs and motion picture projectors. The grain of the wood is studied and respected. A perfect curve might take a week to achieve. The atmosphere is unhurried, almost monastic. The only sounds are the whisper of the plane and the gentle tapping of a mallet adjusting a joint. These wooden patterns will be used to cast iron and brass parts, forming the skeleton of the next great device. At noon, the workers gather in the courtyard under the shade of old elm trees. They sit on wooden benches, opening tin lunchboxes wrapped in checkered cloth. The talk is soft, of families and gardens, of the weather and the progress of a new assembly line. Birds chirp from the branches above, and a light breeze carries the scent of fresh bread. Edison himself sometimes walks among them, nodding hello, his presence as ordinary as a favorite uncle's. There is no sharp division between the inventor and his craftsmen. They share a common purpose, a quiet pride in the things they make together. The sun climbs higher, and the clock tower in the main building chimes the half-hour with a sonorous bell. The clock tower is a reassuring presence, its face visible from nearly every corner of the complex. Its mechanism, designed by Edison's own engineers, ticks with a steady, unhurried rhythm. Each hour is marked by a deep, mellow chime that rolls out over the rooftops and fades into the surrounding meadows. The sound is not a command but a gentle reminder, a musical note that orders the day without urgency. Workers look up from their tasks, note the time, and return to their work with a renewed sense of calm. The tower stands as a symbol of the orderly, peaceful industry that Edison has labored to create, a world where machines serve humanity without haste or clamor. As evening approaches, the factory begins to wind down. The machinists wipe down their tools, the draftsmen roll up their blueprints, and the electric lights are turned off section by section. A janitor pushes a wide broom across the main hall, sweeping sawdust and metal shavings into neat piles. The great dynamos in the powerhouse slow to a stop, their hum fading to silence. Outside, the sky is painted in shades of rose and lavender, and the first stars prick the deepening blue. The complex, so alive during the day, now settles into a peaceful slumber, its red brick softened by twilight. Only a few windows remain lit, where the night shift keeps a gentle watch over ongoing experiments. Edison, who often stays late, retreats to his private office on the second floor. There is a cot in the corner where he takes short naps, a blanket knitted by his wife Mina folded at its foot. The room is simple, a roll-top desk, a bookcase, a model of an electric locomotive on a shelf. He loosens his tie and lies down, the quiet of the sleeping factory enveloping him. Through the window, he can see the clock tower, its hands luminous and patient. He drifts into sleep with the scent of machine oil and the memory of a busy but harmonious day. The resting workshop is not an empty shell, but a vessel filled with the dreams of tomorrow's inventions, poised and ready for the dawn. In the winter of his life, Thomas Edison found refuge in the warm, gentle climate of Fort Myers, Florida. His estate, Seminole Lodge, sits on the banks of the wide and placid Caloosahatchee River. The house is a white wooden structure with deep verandas shaded by swaying palm fronds and cascading bougainvillea blossoms of magenta and coral. The air is thick with the scent of orange blossoms and damp earth. Here, far from the cold northern winters, the inventor becomes a gardener, a botanist, a man who measures time by the slow opening of a flower. The morning sun spills gold over the lawn, and the river glitters like a carpet of molten silver. Edison's laboratory in Florida is a small, sunny building set apart from the main house, its windows open to catch the breeze. It is a simpler place than the great complex at West Orange, filled with potted plants and trays of goldenrod, the plant he hopes will yield a domestic source of rubber. The high windows let in the soft Florida light, and a ceiling fan turns lazily overhead. He works in shirt sleeves, with a straw hat hanging on a peg, his movements still energetic but more unhurried. The workbench is cluttered with dried plant specimens and glass vials of latex sap. It is a laboratory that feels more like a garden shed, a quiet retreat where science and nature meet as old friends. The gardens surrounding Seminole Lodge are a wonderland of tropical foliage. Winding paths of crushed shell crunch pleasantly underfoot, leading past towering royal palms, thickets of bamboo, and fragrant frangipani. A small fountain murmurs in a secluded corner, its water sparkling in the sun. Butterflies drift between blossoms, and a pair of cardinals flashes red among the green. Edison himself planted many of these trees and shrubs, his hands in the soil as often as they were on a telegraph key. In the garden, he is not the wizard of Menlo Park but a gentle caretaker, nurturing life in its simplest, most beautiful forms. Time slows to the rhythm of a leaf unfurling. Afternoons are spent on the wide veranda, where wicker chairs with plump cushions invited drowsy repose. Mina, his wife, sits nearby with a book, occasionally glancing up to watch a sailboat drift along the river. The sound of the water lapping against the dock is a continuous, soothing whisper. Edison closes his eyes, his breathing deepening into the cadence of a man at peace. A glass of iced tea sweats on the table beside him. The sun, filtered through the slatted roof, paints stripes of light and shadow across his resting form. There is no urgency, no pressing deadline. There is only the gentle pulse of the afternoon, carrying him softly toward evening. As dusk approaches, the western sky over the river explodes into a palette of orange, pink, and violet. The water mirrors the spectacle, doubling the beauty. A great blue heron stands motionless on the dock, a silhouette of ancient patience. Inside the house, the living room glows with the warm light of Edison's own electric bulbs, their amber filaments visible through the clear glass of Tiffany lamps. The phonograph in the corner plays a slow, melodic piece by a string quartet, the music drifting through the open windows and mingling with the calls of night birds. It is a twilight of perfect equilibrium, where the artificial and the natural embrace in quiet harmony. In these years, Edison often sits alone in his study after dinner, a single lamp burning on the desk. He reads letters from fellow inventors, leafs through his old notebooks, the corners softened by decades of handling. The pages are filled with sketches and calculations, the handwriting spidery but certain. Each entry holds a memory: the first successful phonograph, the night the lights burned at Menlo Park, the hum of 1,000 dynamos. Outside, the river flows dark and silent, carrying the reflections of stars. The old inventor smiles, not with the fire of ambition, but with the deep contentment of a life fully lived. He closes the notebook and sits in the lamplight, a solitary figure wrapped in a coat of golden warmth. The night deepens around Seminole Lodge. The palm fronds rustle softly in a breeze that smells of the sea. One by one, the lights in the house are extinguished, until only the lamp in the study remains. The inventor rises and walks to the window, looking out at the garden, now a landscape of silver shadows and velvet darkness. Fireflies flicker among the trees, nature's own electric lights. He thinks of the canal in Milan, the willows, his mother's voice reading aloud. All his life he has sought to capture and share the wonders he first glimpsed as a boy. Now, at the end of the journey, he understands that the greatest invention of all is simply a quiet moment like this, a peace that needs no current to flow. At last, he turns off the lamp, and the room is bathed in moonlight. The phonograph has fallen silent. The cylinder no longer turns. The great inventor lies down, his mind as still as the river outside. The world he has helped to shape, lit by his bulbs, filled with music from his machines, rests gently on the edge of sleep. In the distance, a lighthouse beam sweeps across the dark water, a slow, steady pulse. And in the quiet house, under the protective gaze of the stars, Thomas Edison sleeps, his legacy glowing in every lit window across the land, a quiet, enduring flame that will never be extinguished.